Welcome to the Domain Name Wire podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Alleman, and this is episode number 543. My guest on today's show knows when to spot market opportunities. In high school, he flipped bike parts on Facebook Marketplace. He was also a sneakerhead and found ways to jump on the latest shoe drops and flip them for profits. So when domain investor Braden Pollock introduced him to domain names, it definitely clicked. Now, Daniel Koleshchuk is a senior associate with Hilco Digital Assets, where he brokers high-end domain names. On today's show, Daniel talks about his relationship with Braden, who met him through Big Brothers Big Sisters, and how this spurred his interest in understanding of domain names. Daniel also explains how he learned to think like the businesses that are buying domain names and how to figure out who the right person at the business is to talk to about a domain acquisition. This episode is full of tips on outbounding domain names, so grab your notebook and get ready to take notes. First, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Sav.com and its low-cost backordering. You can backorder .com domains for only $10.49. That's the same price Sav charges right now for new .com registrations. They're really good at catching .co domains. This week, you can bid on Kamasutra.co and Rolla.co, R-O-L-A.co. Plus, there are plenty of solid .com and .org domains on the auctions this week. These were domains that Sav caught in the drops. Sign up for an account today and start backordering domains for only $10.49. Go to sav.com/DNW/backorder. That's sav.com/DNW/backorder. Let's visit some of the news from the past week before we chat with Daniel. First up, GoDaddy has released enhancements to its self-brokering tools. Customers who use the self-brokering option can now sell with lease-to-own, and there are improved communication and data tools as well. Notably, the process of submitting an offer is a bit easier now, as people don't have to go through the full GoDaddy account registration process, but I still find it to be a bit clunky. On Domain Name Wire, I write sometimes about DNS abuse reports that name and shame particular top-level domains and registrars. Well, ICANN has a warning about this. Rankings are heavily dependent by which block lists researchers use to create them. And the organization notes that relying on free open source lists often doesn't show the entire picture. The top two most abused top-level domain names are the same in both commercial lists and open source ones, but after that, there's a major divergence. ICANN ran the numbers and found that the number 3 on average on commercial lists is number 10 on open source lists. Number 4 on commercial is 14 on open source, and number 5 is 20th. And number 8 on its commercial list was 51st on open source lists. So this shows a wide divergence. And it's a bit of caution worth considering. ICANN performs its own abuse monitoring in a system called Domain Metrica, which uses commercial lists. Domain name registrar Dynadot is now offering domain investors a way to sell their domains through auctions. Dynadot has started monthly user auctions in which customers can submit domains for bidding. One interesting thing they're doing in these auctions is requiring bid deposits to prevent bogus bidding. It'll be interesting to see how it adjusts that system over time and if other domain auction houses adopt something similar. I will note, for example, that Sav.com pre-authorizes credit cards for bids. Last week, I published an analysis of the top keywords in Afternic sales over the past 12 months, looking at which ones are on their monthly list most often and their average rank. Check out the post on July 8th to see this data, as it can be helpful for your domain investing. And finally, last week, I launched a domain trivia contest. Answer 10 questions correctly, and you'll be entered to win a grand prize that includes a $250 Dynadot store credit, plus annual memberships to both Estabot and NameBio. A quick hint, if you use ChatGPT to answer the questions, you will get some of them wrong. So no shortcuts here. To enter the contest, go to dnw.com/trivia. That's dnw.com/trivia. All right, now let's chat with Daniel. My guest this week is Daniel Koleshchuk. He is a senior associate with Hilco Digital Assets. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Daniel, I'm excited to have you on the show. You know, a lot of us have been in the industry for decades now. It's pretty scary sometimes looking back at pictures from early domain conferences. You're some fresher blood. You know, I'm not saying you're brand new, but you're much younger than I am. So I'm curious about how you learned about the domain name industry.
Yeah, so I've been related to Braden Pollock for about 15 years now. Yeah, 15 years now as of last month. And he started just talking to me about the domain name industry as he was starting out into it about 13 years ago. I was in middle school when he started telling me about it because something that we used to talk about was generally business. And he used to teach me all sorts of business things and what he was doing and whatnot. And as he was discovering and getting more and more involved with the domain industry, he started just talking to me about it. And I took an interest into it. And really, it just became a topic of conversation. The same way any two people have their their topics that they frequent and like to, talk about and whatnot. And domain names just became a part of that. I took an interest into it. It started off with him telling me about how it worked, the aftermarket, essentially the different ways that people were making money. So early on, I got the story about Kevin Ham and Frank Schilling and parking and whatnot. And it was just really fascinating to me that there was this world out there and there's these people that are getting really creative with methods of making money around this one asset class. And that evolved into us frequently playing the domain game that we all know and love. Really, most of high school, a big part of that. So the domain game has two aspects that everybody knows. What do you think they paid for it? What do you think they sold it for? With Braden, there was 4 of them because back then there were steals and deals.
This is on Domain Sherpa you're talking about, or the?
Well, just generally, I'm referencing the Domain Sherpa domain game. But Braden and I were playing this between ourselves.
Okay.
So there was, me taking a guess at what was the fair wholesale price for a domain name. But then there's also what did Braden manage to get it for? And then when he sold the domain, there was what do you think it's worth to an end user? And then what did I think Braden got for it? Because back then there was a lot of buys and sells that were better than what they deserved or than what was fair. So really it just became a topic of conversation and it was a thing we always talked about. And I was just listening to the chatter about domain names all through middle school, through high school, into my late teens. And so really, I got introduced to it by Braden.
Yeah, well, he's a good person to get introduced to it through. So yeah, for sure. So he's been quite successful with it. And then you became a broker in the business. Why did you decide to take that route? How did that start out?
So I think that there was a few aspects here. First off, I always felt like I wanted to get involved in the world of business and particularly sales. Sales was something I had a natural knack for, and identifying opportunities in a market or within an asset class was something that I just had a knack for in general. For example, early on in high school, I used to race bikes. I was like into the velodrome, bike racing, and I wanted upgrades for my bike that I couldn't afford at the time. And so I would spend a lot of time in the Facebook buy, sell, and trade groups. And, you spend hours every day scrolling through a specific niche thing. You're going to just suddenly start identifying what's a good deal, what's desirable, what's not. And there were just opportunities to flip bike parts, turn $250 into $400. So I had some success with that. I was in 9th grade and 10th grade when I had some success there. Near the end of high school in 2017, the sneaker resale market took off, and I've always been really into sneakers.
Sneakerhead.
So I am a sneakerhead. I do have my collection of Jordan 1s, I will say. Just spend more on that than I'm willing to admit. Not recently, though. So I started flipping Yeezys, the Yeezy 350 Boosts, before the bots came in. Back then, the shortcut to securing a pair was using Google's form autofill. So you would have all of your information ready to go, your address, your name, your payment method. You had all of that ready to go on Google, and the sites were first come, first serve, 1 pair per customer. So I would get all of my friends together and we would do overnight drop day sessions. And we had the overnight schedule between the US and Europe mapped out. We knew who was dropping when. and everybody had the autofills ready and everybody had their cards, their debit cards, credit cards ready to go. Anybody who scored a pair, I would reimburse them for it. As soon as it went live, refresh the page, autofill, checkout. So from shoes dropping to checkout, it was about 4 seconds. And we would, get a pair here, 2 pairs there. And so we were getting shoes to resell. Additionally, I was taking pre-orders. Actually, one of my first customers was Braden's accountant at the time because her and her family love sneakers. So she let me know what she wanted and in what size, and I would chase down that pair. And then also just knowing that desirable sizes like men's 8 through 11 sells really well and command the premium. 12s, occasionally can go for a little more because there's less pairs made, but still plenty of people that wear a 12. So a size 12 commands a nice margin. We were going after those for a while. Back when the Easy 350 boots, they were hot, they were new, people were loving it. The bots had not really hit the market yet. Once the bots came out,
and by bots, you mean they're able to come in and snap up all the shoes, kind of like in the expired domain game, right? You couldn't manually go anymore and capture a great domain.
Exactly. And somebody who was really good with the bots was actually Braden's nephew, Tristan. He was the one who got acquainted with it, and he figured out the original workaround. Because American Express on a business account, I guess, lets you have like up to 99 profiles on your account. And back then, if you had multiple quote unquote profiles, you could bypass the 1 pair per customer rule because they were different customers technically. So he did well with the bots. I didn't bother at that point. I had my good run there. We had our fun. That was it for me. So I had a knack for identifying profit opportunities in specific markets, and domains were fascinating for me. I thought that the high end side of things was the most interesting. You're dealing with, the smartest people in the world. These are savvy buyers, these are successful businesses. And I think that the best names are easier to sell because they're so good, and that's why they command the price that they are. And so I wanted to be playing in that sector, but of course that's expensive and you need a lot of money to be buying and selling those, which I don't have yet. Someday. But, so I wanted to be involved with it. And the best way to do it was to learn to sell them and broker them. Part of that is you get to work with, some of the smartest people in the domain industry. And then we get to work with the smartest people in the business world all over the world. It seemed like the place to be. I also appreciated that it is lifestyle friendly. I could work remote. I could work from anywhere in the world. Tools out there allow you to work on your own schedule if you want to use the tools. It seemed like by far the best thing out there. And of course, the truth is I had an opportunity to get into the space and get warm introductions to everybody into the entire industry. And, it really comes down to how do you not take that? It's ridiculous not to take that.
Did you start by working on some of Braden's domains?
Very briefly, I took a stab at it on my own. That did not last long. Until I went and learned from the experts.
Okay.
It didn't seem like the way to go. There was, at the same time, there's a win-win to be had, by learning from another broker. In return, they also have assistance in their operation.
When did you join Hilco Digital Assets?
I just crossed my 3-year mark. So that would have been in 22. I am technically day one of Hilco Digital Assets as it was formed. Andrew knew that as soon as he started it.
Andrew Miller. Yeah.
Andrew Miller. Yeah. Andrew Miller knew that he would, need help with that early on in terms of just operating and doing the work essentially. So I joined as soon as that was formed in June of 22.
Okay. So, and how long have you been brokering? How long would you say your experience is brokering? Just another year on top of that, or?
Another year on top of that, 4 years.
Yeah. Okay.
4 years is the number I say. I took some stab at it with Braden's smaller names. Before that didn't go far. And I quickly realized that there is just so much to learn. There is so much to understand. It's not a simple gig at all. So
it's interesting that you say that. I want to dig into that a little bit more as we go along here because, it seems so basic and simple and, you got domains, you go to sell them, but you also said that, high-end domains kind of sell themselves, but that's not the verbiage you use because you said everyone wants them, but they want them at a certain price, right? No one's going to say no to a domain. It's just they know it might cost a lot of money. And that's probably where a lot of the selling comes in, right?
Not everybody knows that they want it. I think that a big issue with the domain industry that existed until very recently, that being the general knowledge of the significance of a good domain name. My understanding and what I've seen even since learning to broker is a ton of leadership teams, founders, CEOs, marketing teams, legal teams completely overlook the significance of the domain name to their business. And that's just because people don't realize the difference between a great domain and a bad one. They don't realize what changes when they move to it. What happens is so many of these companies are operating on less than perfect domains, to say the least, and they have their benchmarks for what's considered good performance in their efforts to market, to communicate trust, to communicate authenticity, legitimacy, credibility, industry leadership. And they just think that that's the going rate for what's considered good quality work and ROI against their efforts. They just don't know that there's more to be had by removing the friction that is created by a lesser brand. So there is a ton of educating. I think since COVID, it has become extremely more known out there since a lot of businesses were forced online. And what happened was more people are competing online. And because more people are competing online, there's a lot of people that were smart and knew that they needed the good domain name for the brand. And they went and made that move. And then there's more and more businesses out there that are using great domain names, which enables more and more other businesses to learn from them and pick up on what they're doing. And then it's an exponential snowball effect. So I think that curve is coming around very recently, but there is still a ton of educating to do. And one of the hardest things with learning to broker a domain name, especially from my position, for those that don't know, I just turned 26 years old. I've never officially launched or ran or built a business prior to this. So this world is new to me. And so you have to learn, how do these people think? How do these people communicate to one another? What is it that actually matters to them? This is all stuff I'm learning through, well, first off, mentorship, second off, trial and error on the brokerage front. You have to learn how to communicate these things effectively, where you're not just trying to force a thing on them, but you're communicating facts and value that then enable a CEO or any decision maker to then do their own math based on their own understanding of the business to then and you give them the facts of the significance of the domain upgrade. And then they use those facts to apply them into their own internal equation of their business and then come with a conclusion on what that ROI, would be like.
So learning to think how a business thinks, I would say, is kind of to summarize what you're doing here when it comes to an opportunity like this.
But also, so learning to understand how they're thinking, but at the same time, presenting the important facts to them that enable them to then apply that to their own unique scenario, which then allows them to conclude how the domain name upgrade affects their operations. And yeah.
So we were chatting before we hit record and you said something like all outbound all the time. So I imagine a lot of what you're doing is just cold contacting, using your network to contact people. Talk to me about the outbounding process and some tips you might have for people doing that.
Sure. So I want to start off with the extremely important piece that happens before outreach, and that is who you're going to reach out to. Of course, you want the CEO to be on board. You want a board, the board members, the investors to be on board. But oftentimes, you want to maximize the odds of a business wanting and understanding the significance of the domain name. So that means you need a champion. You need an internal champion who's going to get it. And something that I spent a ton of time on is learning how to identify who is the most likely to be my champion. You can't know for certain. The only instance where you can know for certain is, it's Jamie Siminoff. We know he previously rebranded Doorbot into ring.com, spent all of his money and then some on the domain name and then flipped it. Like, we know him as a case study. So we know that he loves domains, he gets domains. Oh, we know that Janik Malling upgraded to public.com from Hello Public and raves about it. We know these things. So that is somebody who we know is a champion. But most of the time, that's not the case. So you're looking at decision makers starting from the top within an organization. What have they done? What is on their LinkedIn? What is out there on the internet about them? What have they built? What are companies that they've previously been involved with? What domain name do those previous companies use? Do you happen to have industry knowledge to know that they happen to also own these domain names, or they happen to acquire a company that also owned domain names, or that they have sold off some of their valuable domain names or have defensively acquired others? It helps when you've just spent so much time around the industry that you just kind of know who's domain savvy and who's not, or you're at least able to identify quick. But I spend a lot of time just looking at different decision makers and, okay, where do they work? And what were they doing within that company that has a good domain name, to then understand what was their role around the domain name decision, or did they at least have to consciously pay attention to it and acknowledge that the domain name made a difference to their business then? And that's even if they're not the chief marketing officer or the general counsel or the CEO at this current business, but they have the experience and knowledge around it to then advise their team, because their team is going to listen to them. So if you then present what is in fact a strategic domain opportunity to the person that gets it, and that person knows for themselves, oh yeah, this matters, this is awesome, this is going to be good for us. Hey guys, look alive, this just hit my desk, we need this. So I'm looking for that individual.
Okay, so the internal champion. So it's not necessarily like, hey, let's just go straight to the CMO or the CEO. Let's find a person who can champion this within the organization.
Well, the other thought process there is, I believe personally that somebody, a chief marketing officer or a CEO or a founder who is doing their job well, is going to at least understand and collect all of the facts and understand that, hey, maybe I'm not an expert in this. Maybe I'm not well acquainted, or I don't have experience with this, but intuitively I can see why this is interesting. Let me collect all of the facts for myself, educate myself on this, and then make a well-informed decision. I believe that is expected of them as a leader. So they should. But of course, you want to maximize your odds. So you want to find somebody who is the most likely to get it. If that person doesn't exist, you go for the person responsible for the decision. And it's the right thing to do is to collect all of the facts and make a decision with the most information possible. If they don't do that, that's their problem. That's on them. It tells you plenty about how they're running a business. So learn to find a champion and spend time looking at their employment history and their roles to, really dig up what involvement, if any, they have with strategic, domain names. On the outreach front, something that I like to think about is, do you notice when you open the notifications tab on your phone and you determine if a notification is relevant or irrelevant as soon as you read the notification without opening the app?
Yes. Yeah.
I like when my entire message, the entire point of my message, is crystal clear within that notification. You don't have to open the email or the LinkedIn message.
So essentially, the subject line of it is,
and the first sentence. It's like the first 15 to 20 words. The first 15 to 20 words and your subject line should communicate the entire reason you're reaching out. Additional details, they come from there, but you want somebody to see, oh, domainnamewire.com. Hey, letting you know that this domain name is available for acquisition. And it's like, oh, immediately I know this matters to me. This is relevant. Let's open this up and see what else there is in the message and then go from there. But the whole point is that in just a few seconds, they know the entire point of the message. And your buyer who at least understands why they need to see this is going to open it and read the message. So that is an important goal for me.
Cool. Any other tips on outbounding?
Yes. Stop using premium. Abandon the word premium. Today's July 3rd.
For domain names. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Guys, domainers.
But what about
stop using the
super
word.
premium or?
No. Listen, all of them. Today's July 3rd. This morning, Rick Schwartz put out a LinkedIn post about this, and it is beautifully written. Go read that post. It is spot on. I was going to talk about this anyways. I had this noted down as a thing to rant about here. Stop using the word premium. If the domain name is strategic, if the domain name will be beneficial to the business, they'll buy it. If they understand how and why, they will buy it. It's the domain name speaks for itself. So, they either get it or they don't. And if they don't, it's on me to educate them. The ChatGPT summaries, those short essays that people put out about why their domain name is so great with the global market cap and all of the potential use cases. Stop that. Guys, stop. Please. They're horrible. First off, if somebody is buying a domain name, they know why they're buying it. If they see a reason to have the domain name, it's for whatever they've got going on. They have their own reason for it. They know what they're going to do with it. They know how they're going to use it and what it's going to do for them. They have their own vision for it. Stop telling people what a domain name can do.
So would you say your initial emails to people are very brief then?
Yeah, short and sweet. Hey, this domain name, letting you know that this is available. And another thing that I'm going to throw in actually while answering this question, be conscious of the risk of a UDRP. John Berryhill had a phenomenal roundtable at the ICA meeting I think it was the ICA meeting about this. Write your emails like they're going to be read in court. Let people know that, for example, if it's a brand match domain name, take anything out there, rocket.com. If you're showing somebody rocket.com and say it's Rocket Mortgage, hey, letting you know that this domain name is now available for acquisition, you should know that we're showing this to everybody that is relevant to the term. We're marketing the opportunity to everybody that makes sense. Now they know we're not targeting you because you have a ton of money and we're going to squeeze you for it. And hey, we're going to infringe on your market.
Trademarks around Rocket. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, hey, domain's available. We're marketing it. This is who we are.
Yeah.
That's it.
Briefly, I just pulled up Rick's, I want to say tweet, but I don't know what you call them now on X. But so we're recording this July 3rd. And so I was just kind of skimming through this. I'll just kind of read this. He writes, from the pet peeve department, the overused word premium is killing domainer credibility. The fact that you have to say it's premium proves it's not. I think that's a really good point, right? Like if you see rocket.com and you say it should be kind of obvious. But so then he continues, premium is the domain world's version of luxury condos. Everything's luxury, even Roach Motel. It's meaningless. You know what premium really is? Just pigeons pretending to be eagles. 98% of so-called premium domains are not premium. They're pigeon. I'm going to leave this word out so we keep our PG rating, but everyone knows what he says. So he goes on to say, you want better, stronger, more useful terms, try high profile, memorable, attention-grabbing, category-defining, powerful. These actually tell a story. Premium tells me you don't know what you're selling. Most domainers wouldn't know a truly premium domain if it slapped them upside the head. Stop using lazy words, start using the right ones. If your domain is truly valuable, it will speak for itself, which he just kind of said. So, and then he says a couple other things there. But yeah, that's kind of to his point, and I like that. But everyone says their domain is premium now. And I get email overtures from people that my thinking all along is if you have to say why a domain is valuable, if you have to explain its purpose, then it's probably not that good, right? So.
Right. And these, especially on, I'm going to be a hypocrite and say on the ultra premium side of domains, the reason why they command the prices that they command and why they generate so much value for a business is because they speak for themselves. It's because on their own accord, they communicate authenticity, legitimacy, trust, industry leadership, long-term commitment to their practice. And that resonates with humans. Humans have already been programmed for that. So the domain name just rolls with that, the nature of how that works. So that's why it does that. It doesn't sell for so much because, so-and-so, gave you, a big summary on all the things. It's what it does on its own that makes it valuable. And the team, the decision maker that understands that and can afford it is going to be the one to buy it.
Sure. But I suspect that in these cases, there is education around where the market is, right? Like comps and that sort of thing.
Yes and no. the thing is every domain name is unique. There is no, you can't compare it. Take a Rolls Royce Phantom where there's 1,000 units out in the world, and you can determine that, based on the color combination and the mileage and the condition that it's in and its service records, it has a set range that it goes for because identical units
just like racing
same.
bike parts and shoes.
Same thing, exactly. Houses, the house next door on your block, has an extra bedroom and a swimming pool, but yours doesn't. There's a going rate for that. Domain names, there's sometimes, yes, the comps are relevant, but oftentimes it's just unique to the scenario. How bad does the buyer want it, or does end user rather, how bad does the end user want it against what does the seller want, and what's, how strong of a stance are they willing to take against it? And they need to meet. Rocket.com came out as a $15 million deal. And if the seller, was willing, if it was a different seller that was like thrilled with, with 5, they would have asked 7.
To get 15, you have to turn down 5, right? So.
Right. You have to be willing to walk away from 10. And, so these massive, it's the only reason voice.com sold for 30 million. It was because you had a seller that said no to 20, an end user that was desperate to have it. They had to be voice.com. That's the only reason that sold for 30. Otherwise, if it wasn't Michael Saylor, who first off, that money
CEO
was not moving.
MicroStrategy.
Yeah. Exactly. The CEO of Strategy, who is a billionaire, that money is not moving the needle. It is not changing the quality of his life. And he genuinely understands the value of domains. He's got one of the finest portfolios in the world. He had the means to say no to 20 million. Otherwise, that would have been just another oneword.com, just like, the others that we hear about. It would have totally been a 7-figure deal, if not back then, really high 6s. So it's a matter of, meeting how bad does the end user want it, and what is the seller willing to wait for? And if that day comes, that's where they trade. Sometimes comps do come into play, but the scenario of, of everyone's circumstances kind of trumps it. It's like, hey,
absolutely. That's a really good point.
And the truth is, it's not like, hey, I can just move my family into this other house 2 blocks down, and they're still close to the same school that I want them to go to in this neighborhood that we like. It's, hey, this is your brand. So this is what it takes to get it. And if you don't, these are the issues you're facing by not having it strategically, the lower subpar performance of your marketing efforts and customer acquisition efforts and whatnot. Not to mention, what is the value of the email leakage? And then, or you can rebrand. Now you got to take 3 steps back before you can take 5 steps forward. So, what is the cost of rebranding? What does that do to you in the short term? And how much effort do you have to put into the long term of building yourself as a new brand? How deep into your current brand are you? So then you have to consider that if you want to optimize your performance, or you can just not and remain on your sub brand and have the result, your subpar brand, and continue to see the results that you're seeing. That's your prerogative.
Any other tips before we move on?
No, that covers it.
I think there's some great stuff in there, and some of it I haven't thought about, or at least not articulated in the way that you just did. So I'm curious. So you've been basically brokering domains for 4 years. You've always worked on kind of these higher end ones, other than some previous stuff with Braden. Correct? It's always been kind of the higher end. So you started right during COVID, when, as you mentioned, everyone was getting online, that sort of thing. Have you seen just over the last 4 years any kind of change in how end users regard high-value domain names?
Yeah. So a few things here that play into each other. First off, since COVID, a ton of businesses were suddenly forced to move online. Other companies that existed online had to ramp up their presence online. So what's happened since COVID is a lot more competition on the internet, a lot more companies are operating online. They're all fighting for a finite amount of mind share. And because they're fighting for mind share that is now harder to earn, so many of those businesses got savvy and are essentially running their business on a strategic domain name. So now you have more and more businesses on good domain names. More and more businesses on good domain names means more and more people observing businesses operating on good domain names. So what's happening? Competitors are paying attention to what their competitors are doing. There's the mergers and acquisitions side, where sellers are selling off businesses and companies are acquiring businesses that own great domains. There's a few things at play there. First off, let's just say a buyer is appraising a company that they want to buy. They will see a domain name with a large enterprise value on the balance sheet. And they may ask, why is this domain name worth so much to your business? What is this about? What are you trying to do here? And the company will explain why the domain name is worth so much to their business. This is what it does for us. This is the ROI and the improvements in all of our efforts in our operation. So therefore, it is worth this much by the ROI that it generates. So then the company acquiring the business will then understand, oh, these domain names are significant to these businesses. And there's a lot of people involved in those deals. There's executives on both sides, lawyers, all sorts of people, bankers. There's all sorts of people that observe these things and notice these things, and they take note of that because it's interesting. So another thing that happens is, let's just say a company happens to own a domain name. They acquired a company that happened to own some cool domain names. They didn't think anything of it. Next thing you know, they're getting an unsolicited, say it's a oneword.com, a strong oneword.com. All of a sudden, here comes an unsolicited $100,000 offer. And people are going to think, oh, email, offer, scan. And then you look into it because you own the domain name. And they're like, no, this is a legitimate party. I just vetted them. This is a real business, a real broker or a real company that wants it. This is real. Are we sure this isn't spoof? Get on the phone with them. Yeah, this is legit. The whole thing, it's real. And then people get curious. Hey guys, I got an offer on this domain name. This is a surprise, long story short. And then they try to understand what it is about the domain name that makes it so valuable. So the point is that there is exponentially more opportunities for more and more people to learn why the domain name matters. And when that is happening, more and more people then start rolling that strategy into their own operation, and it's a snowball effect.
Right.
So more and more companies are educated on this topic way more than ever before, and it's not slowing down.
Yeah. And you're seeing that just over the past 4 years, right? Whereas,
significantly. Significantly over the last 4 years.
So I'm curious before we close, AI. We mentioned AI in here as it comes to previews for domains and such, but I'm curious if you're hearing from buyers how AI is impacting their business, and does that change how they view domain names at all?
I believe that AI has had an influence on many end users and how they view domains. Oftentimes, they're viewing it incorrectly. There's actually a new misconception out there around AI and the domain names. The majority that have any understanding of domain names that are not understanding it as a brand are just thinking about type-in traffic and search. They're thinking about SEO and search engine and, just straight type-in traffic.
Which search engine is changing a lot with AI.
Significantly. And so people think, oh, hey, ChatGPT is going to kill Google. The search engine as we know it is on its way out. The domain name is irrelevant because it's not going to be discoverable the same. There's not going to be type-in. There isn't going to be SEO. So who cares about the domain name? That's a common misconception that we're hearing. My opinion is AI is in fact going to be favorable in this instance for domain names. The reason being is if you remove search engines, it's the relationship between AI and the internet as we know it, the World Wide Web, similar to the relationship that the World Wide Web has with the physical real world. So when we got the internet, all of a sudden there was this single place online where everything was available. Everything was available on the internet. And with that, at the same time, everybody still needed their own physical home in the real world. They still needed their business. They still needed their physical location, their restaurant, their storefront, the brick and mortar, their offices, their headquarters, their distribution, whatever it is. They still needed that, but they also had their home on the internet. Similarly, now, instead of Google, a ton of people are moving to ChatGPT and Grok and whatever others come in the near future. And they are getting a ton of information out of ChatGPT instead of Googling it. But ChatGPT is going to be this new central place for everything. But online, every business is still going to need their own unique home on the internet. And this is simply the same they're fighting for the same real estate as the real world. Depending on what you're doing and what you're going for, your physical real estate matters. It's still, it comes down to the same thing as like why, nobody can open their flagship on a swamp. It just doesn't work. Louis Vuitton's huge marketing stunt recently is they turned their entire storefront in New York City to make it look like their chests, their big trunks. I don't know if you've seen that, but huge building, huge skyscraper, and it literally just looks like a stack of Louis Vuitton trunks. It's beautiful. It's genius. They couldn't do that in the desert an hour and a half outside of town. It wouldn't have the same effect. It wouldn't work. Similarly, they're still going to need their own storefront and their own place of business on the internet, even though people are looking for information on ChatGPT.
Sure. And I think people they don't transact on ChatGPT, right?
Correct.
But they do research there and then they go transact somewhere else. And so
Correct.
To the extent that people aren't typing in a term on Google, they're asking ChatGPT where to find the best mortgage, that sort of thing. You still need it to refer to, but they still need to go to Rocket or someone else to actually originate that mortgage.
And another side of this is AI can get as good as it's going to get. Out of home advertising isn't going anywhere. Billboards are here to stay. Big signage is here to stay. Cars that are wrapped in their banners and whatever else, and video advertising and all of that is here to stay. We're still going to exist in the real world. We're still going to interact in the real world. We're still going to go outside and go places and socialize with humans. And they're still going to market to us in the real world. They're not going to stop advertising to us. It's a great place to catch our eyeballs. So that's still going to continue. But you can't advertise to ChatGPT if you're Nike. You're going to advertise straight to you, and that's going to be Nike.com.
So in some ways, having a great, memorable domain is more important than ever.
The out of home, it's still significant because you have a few seconds of somebody's attention, and most people just aren't paying attention to the world around them. So you have to be as easy to remember and as easy to discover as possible, which is why Nike has to be Nike.com and not buynikeshoes.xyz. They just can't. No one's going to remember that because people aren't making an effort to remember things the vast majority of the time. You have to play into that and make it yourself hard to forget if the subject or the topic that you're marketing is something that they cared about.
Well, Daniel, this has been really interesting. I enjoy getting perspectives from people in the industry, especially on the brokerage side, and especially someone who's relatively newer, but is quickly cutting up to speed like you. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing some of your wisdom around this.
And I appreciate you being the host of my first ever podcast.
All right. You did great, Daniel.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I try. I did my best, certainly. I will tell you that. a huge thank you. And I will say this was a ton of fun. And I'm excited to hear what people think of this episode.
All right. My guest this week has been Daniel Koleshchuk. He is a senior associate with Hilco Digital Assets. That's a wrap on this week's Domain Name Wire podcast. You can listen to all previous episodes at dnw.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.